3.2 Arousal. Arousal is the intensity of behaviour and links to the degree of emotion. Arousal has two branches, somatic and cognitive. Somatic arousal is the changing state of the body, and cognitive arousal is the moment-to-moment changes in worry or negative thought. Arousal can be a positive or negative thing when in context of an athlete's performance within a sport. This was because different sports require different arousal levels, and if the athlete is not at the optimum point of arousal, it can hinder their performance, as they will not be focusing on the correct things in their events. I will be looking at three different theories as to how arousal works. The first is the drive theory. The drive theory states that arousal's increase and performance levels are proportional, and the graph on the left shows a relationship between the two. The dominant response, which is a motor program that is already learned and will usually become evident when arousal is raised, and the quality of performance depends on how well the skill has been learned. For example, a novice juggler would not improve their skill with high arousal levels around them, as their dominant response kicks in, whereas an expert would be able to perform as good or even better under high arousal conditions. A criticism of the drive theory is that it is unable to explain how or why professional athletes and sports players make mistakes in game situations. For example, in a penalty shootout, when England are in the World Cup, the atmosphere around the stadium and the whole gravity of the game should create an extremely high level of arousal, and therefore, as the theory states, they should be at their peak performance levels. So why do the players, like Chris Waddle in the 1990 World Cup, miss? This is what the theory struggles to explain. The next theory is the inverted U theory. The inverted U theory states that there are three stages of arousal that can be achieved in sport. There is under arousal, optimum arousal, and over arousal. Each section has its own effects on how an athlete performs in game. Under arousal means the concentration is limited while in this stage, and attention may wander. When under-aroused, athletes can fail to pick up on the relevant cues that are occurring within their sport. Optimum arousal is considered the perfect state to play sport in. The level of this can be higher or lower within different sports. For example, darts will have a lower optimum arousal to rugby, as darts is a precision-based steady game where rugby is fast-paced and high contact. And finally, over-arousal. This causes an athlete's field of vision to narrow excessively. This means that the athlete may miss certain cues within the game, as they are only able to focus on one or two things maximum when in this state. This level of arousal is hypervigilance and causes blind panic, which is where people lose the ability to focus. Criticisms of the inverted U theory is that the curve on the graph shows that there is a gradual build-up towards getting to the optimum and over-aroused stages on the graph. However, in reality, it is not always a case of a slow build-up to over-arousal. However, it is a much more instantaneous thing. For example, in a football game, if a midfielder is at their optimum arousal level, but then someone puts a heavy challenge on them, they might flip from this straight away and become over-aroused and get aggressive or angry with the opposition. This proves that the slow gradual build-up and decline is not an actual thing that happens all the time. The third and final theory is the catastrophe theory. The catastrophe theory explains that there is an optimum level of arousal as seen on the graph. However, if an incident or catastrophe takes place at any point, there will be a steep decline in the athlete's performance from this. After this steep decline, the athlete can follow one of two paths. The first being it affects them for the rest of the game or event, and their performance standards do not pick up from that moment, or the athlete can collect themselves and start to slowly build up their performance again to a point of optimum arousal. An example of this happening is if a goalkeeper in football gives away a penalty. Their performance has just dropped or seen an extreme decline. For it to then rebuild and get better, the goalkeeper can save the penalty, and this will increase their performance levels back up and return their arousal to the optimum point. However, an example of their performance lowering further could be if they do not save the penalty and they get frustrated with themselves, and this will create an over-arousal in the player and will see them continue to get frustrated and lower their performance through the game. There are no criticisms to this theory that I have found.